All right. Are you guys ready to start seeing some actual coding examples? We're gonna start off with variables. So I had to bear with me for the first couple of videos. A lot of these videos are kind of circular in their dependencies. So this lecture talks about input and output. Input and output talks about variables. So just bear with me, and once you get through all of them, they'll or not even all of them, the first few, it'll start to make a lot more sense. And I apologize for that. It's really hard to really introduce some of the individual concepts to start off with without needing some of the others. But that's okay. You're all educators, you're smart people, so you'll be able to catch on quickly. So, what are variables? Um, a lot of you have probably, when you hear the word variable, you might think of algebra and solving for x, and it's kind of similar to that in programming. Variables are they hold values. And what those values are can change kind of based on what your program's doing or what you want them to be. So, an important distinction in computer science, variables are always assigned with a single equal sign. So, unlike math, where equal signs, again, circular logic here, equal signs show that two things are equals. Surprise, surprise. A single equal sign is assignment, almost universally in computer science in programming languages, and that holds true for Python, which is what we're going to be using. So, variables are the names that are assigned to a value. They're assigned using the equal sign. So, we can look here in our first thing. We have 5 is equal to x. So I know I read that backwards, and I did that for a specific reason. Normally, when we're looking at things and in English, we read left to right. So I know you see that and you want to think x is equal to 5, but yeah, I think it's important to read it in reverse because what we're really doing is we're assigning the value 5 to the variable of x. So that's kind of what the reverse tells us. X is equal to 5 gets the same point across, but it doesn't as implicitly, I guess, express that it's the assignment. So what this line is doing, and again, we haven't seen IO yet. This is a print statement. I know I showed it in the very first lecture. We'll talk about it briefly more later. But yeah, so we're assigning 5 to be x, and then we're just hitting print, and we get back that x is equal to 5. So that's great. That's pretty basic example. They get a lot more interesting as we go on. So this lecture is going to be a little light on the coding examples, just because a couple of the lectures later on really dive in to it, and I'm not trying to waste your guys' time here. It's important to get you the building blocks, but I could give you a 50-minute lecture about variables, but for all you really need to know is what we're going to cover here in 5 or 10 minutes to get started. So variable names are very important. They only contain letters, numbers, and underscores. They have to start with either a letter or an underscore. So we can see like valid underscore name is valid. One underscore invalid name. That's not valid because it starts with a letter. Numbers can be used. Numbers are almost never used for variable names. You're welcome to. And I don't know why. It's just whenever I'm reading through code or writing code or seeing anyone else's written code, I don't know I ever see variable names with numbers in them. I know if I'm writing a variable and I need it like variable 1 or something, I will literally write out 1. I don't know why. It's just a thing people do. So that's a convention you'll likely fall into as well, but you don't necessarily need to. Just because it's the way something is done doesn't mean that's the only way or the right way something is done. Especially in programming, every solution has probably 100 more equally valid solutions. So spaces are not allowed in variable names. That's why we use underscores instead. And don't use Python keywords. So right now, if you haven't written Python before, you might be sitting there thinking, but Danny, what's a Python keyword? Well, a lot of them are basic programming ones. If else, print right here, in, etc. We'll go through a lot of the keywords in the lectures. Others you might need to just check in Google to see if it's a keyword. It will be pretty easy to find, but that just like overwrites things. So let's come back up here, or you know what? We'll come down to this bottom one. And we'll see what happens when we do print is equal to 5. Okay, that works fine, but now are we able to still print hello? I'm going to tell you, we aren't, because we assigned 5 to hold the integer value, or we assigned print, excuse me, to hold the integer value of 5. It's no longer usable as a function. So we can't use print anymore in this terminal until we reset. So let's go ahead and we'll restart the kernel, hit restart, clear it all out. Hopefully, maybe sometime. Again, I apologize. I use a different environment usually, so I can't remember exactly how to do it. But we'll just get rid of those two things, and it doesn't matter for this notebook. We'll rerun it, and by the time you guys are watching these videos, I promise I'll have figured out and refreshed myself how to clear the output so we can get rid of that. I'm getting distracted. Types. So types are kind of loosely defined as what type a variable is. So earlier, you probably heard me say that 5 was an int. Integers are, of course, whole numbers. There's a lot of others. In programming languages, typing can either be static or dynamic. Static means that once a variable is of a certain type and typically declared of that type, it cannot be a different type. It can, however, hold different values. So let's say Python were a static programming language. It isn't, it's dynamic, but that would mean that X could only ever be integer values. I can make it any other integer value besides 5, but it can only be integer values. Dynamically typed variables and languages, on the other hand, the variables can change their typing. So X is an integer up here, but then if we come down here, we could also assign a string to it. So strings are just words, sentences, anything made up of single characters is what a string is. So as I mentioned, Python is dynamically typed, and the values associated with variables are what have the types. So X in of itself, and I kind of got sloppy with my language earlier, so I apologize. X in of itself isn't an integer. It does hold an integer, but X isn't an integer. So there's a lot of types out there, and there's more than we're going to need. There's more than I'm going to cover. But at the basic ones that are going to be really vital to this 6-week thing is integers, whole numbers, floats, non-whole numbers, I guess, numbers with a floating point. Chars or characters are just single characters. So A is a character, that sort of thing. Strings are groupings of characters, such as words, sentences, anything. So like this whole file is essentially a string, but the single A there is a character. Boolean values are either true or false. So this print statement isn't going to work for me anymore because, I broke print, but pretty much all that is doing is if you want to find out the type of something, put it in the type function call. Again, we're going to talk about functions later. It's very confusing how these all work together to cover the basics, but whatever. So you can print type of your variable, and it'll tell you what type of variable is stored in there. So yeah, that's just kind of the quick and dirty variable overview. We'll get into more of them later.